This presentation examines Jewish prisoners' experiences in Nazi forced labor camps in the Baltic states, with particular focus on the camps in Estonia and Lithuania during 1944, the critical final year of Nazi occupation in those areas. Drawing mostly on survivors' testimonies, I will discuss both the mechanisms of survival and resistance and the systematic mass murders that characterized this period. Estonia was conquered by Nazi Germany following Operation Barbarossa. Before the war, Estonia's Jewish population numbered 4,500. Many Jews escaped with the retreat of the Red Army, and it is estimated that between 1,000 to 2,000 Jews remained. All were murdered in the winter of 1941 by Einsatzgruppe A. The Wannsee Conference statistics notably marked Estonia as Judenfrei. After the destruction of Estonian Jewry, Jews from other locations were deported to Estonia, from Theresienstadt, the German Reich, the Vilna Ghetto, the Kovno Ghetto, Transylvania, and Latvia. In the late summer of 1943, thousands of Jews were forcibly deported from the Vilna Ghetto to forced labor camps in Estonia. The deportees endured unimaginable conditions during their journey, packed into overcrowded cattle cars without proper ventilation, water, or sanitation, all while living in constant fear of death. Upon arrival in Estonia, the prisoners were subjected to grueling forced labor. Their tasks included laying railway tracks, digging anti-tank trenches, and performing intensive forest work, such as cutting trees and preparing beams. Others were employed in quarrying stones and turning them into gravel. In addition, workshops were set up in the camps where tailors, shoemakers, and other tradesmen were compelled to produce goods for the German army. The main concentration camp and its sub-camps in Vaivara began to be established in the summer of 1943 due to the urgent need of the Germans for working hands to support the German military efforts against the expected Soviet offensive. In total, about 20 camps were established. Following Soviet attacks on the area, especially the massive offensive on September 16, 17, 1944 near Tallinn, and the panicked retreat of the Reich forces, preparations began for the evacuation of the camps in Estonia. By the way, after the assassination attempt on Hitler's life on July 1944, revenge was carried out in the camps, with around 10% of the prisoners being executed. In any case, by the summer of 1944, the Germans began evacuating some camps, including transporting prisoners by ship to Stutthof. However, prisoners from Kluga and Lagedi camps could not be transported across the Baltic Sea before the Soviet advance on Tallinn on September 17th, resulting in the Germans destroying these camps through mass executions. The Lagedi prisoners were murdered on September 18 and the Kluga prisoners on September 19. In Kluga, approximately 2,500 Jews were methodically executed, and their bodies were arranged on pyres in a failed attempt to hide evidence of the crime. Prisoners from other camps were also murdered during this period. After the Germans retreated, Soviet forces reached Kluga on September 22, 1944. They found still burning pyres with bodies and documented the scene extensively through photographs and reports. The Soviet Extraordinary State Commission investigated both Kluga and Lagedy, collecting evidence and survivors' testimonies. They found the bodies arranged in layers with logs between them, ready for burning, showing the systematic nature of these final mass murders. Going back to life in the camps. The terror methods in Estonian camps included sadistic abuse and humiliation, particularly during roll calls, appel, when prisoners were forced to perform exhausting exercises. The punishment system was brutal and inhumane. Guards would beat prisoners while forcing them to count their own lashes. Other cruel punishments included tying naked prisoners to trees during winter. Those who attempted escape and were recaptured faced severe consequences, including being hanged upside down or being attacked by SS guard dogs. Despite these horrific conditions, Jewish prisoners managed to maintain their cultural identity and spirit through various clandestine activities. They organized secret literary gatherings and lectures by prisoners who were intellectuals on various topics. They also celebrated Jewish holidays when possible. In the Narva camp, for example, prisoners celebrated Hanukkah in the winter of 1943. When news reached them of Vilna's liberation on July 13, 1944, they managed to hold a small, secretive celebration. Artistic expressions became a form of resistance and survival. Artists, prisoners continued to create while imprisoned, composing music lyrics and keeping diaries on whatever scraps of paper they could find. Obtaining paper was extremely challenging, so prisoners often resorted to using empty cement bags as writing material. They even conducted English language classes, showing their determination to maintain an intellectual life despite their circumstances. Among the prisoners of the Estonian camps were several former known inmates of the Vilna Ghetto, including three notable figures: Hirsch Glick, the poet best known for composing the iconic Partisan song; Veli Kalmanovich, a respected spiritual leader and writer who kept a detailed diary while in the ghetto; and Herman Kruk, a chronicler who documented Jewish experiences in both the Vilna ghetto and the Estonian labor camps. Kalmanovich, who was deported to Estonia in early September 1943, just weeks before the final liquidation of the Vilna ghetto, spent the remaining months of his life at the Narva forced labor camp. Life in the Narva camp was brutal, with prisoners subjected to harsh physical labor. 60-year-old Kalmanovich's health deteriorated as he became ill and frail from exhaustion, hunger, and disease. This distinguished man was tasked with cleaning the camp's toilets. Despite these conditions, he continued to engage in intellectual and cultural activities, organizing lectures and discussions among the Jewish prisoners. His resilience in the face of suffering inspired many of his fellow inmates. Tragically, Kalmanovich perished in the camp due to the inhuman conditions. His comrades cremated his body in an improvised crematorium. Hirsch Glick, another key figure was also deported to the Estonian camps. In his testimony from 1946, Arye Urbach described his acquaintances with Glick and detailed his activities in the camps, including Glick's tragic end. After a failed escape attempt from the Goldfields camp, Glick was murdered by the Germans. Hermann Krug's dedication to documenting Jewish life remained steadfast even in the Estonian camps, where he continued writing detailed accounts of prisoners' daily routines and survival strategies until his final moment. His last known diary entry is dated September 17th, 1944, merely 10 hours before his murder at Lagedi camp. I would like to say a few words about resistance. Jewish resistance networks operated across multiple Estonian labor camps, largely established by former underground fighters from the Vilna Ghetto. At the Soski camp, FPO United Partisan Underground members created a resistance cell in barrack number 12 led by Tzvi Grisha Tsepelevich. Their resistance focused on maintaining human dignity and solidarity, preventing the Nazi goal of dehumanizing prisoners through brutal conditions. The underground movement spread throughout several Estonian camps, developing secret cells that coordinated resistance activities. Their operations had multiple objectives: maintaining prisoners' morale, establishing contact with partisan forces in nearby forests, organizing escape attempts, and creating support networks among prisoners. The underground utilized the experience of former ghetto fighters who brought their organizational skills and resistance tactics to the camps. These resistance efforts represented both physical and spiritual opposition to Nazi persecution, while some members focused on escape plans and partisan connections, others, like the FPO group in Soski, emphasized maintaining moral strength and human solidarity under extreme conditions. Both approaches proved crucial for survival and resistance in the Estonian camp system. Historian Mark Dvozhetsky, who was himself a prisoner in the Estonian camps and survived, documented several organized underground resistance activities, including establishing underground groups in all camps despite the extreme dangers involved, conducting secret meetings, or creating communication networks with prisoners in other camps, attempting to establish contact with partisan fighters, planning the carrying out acts of sabotage, develop plans to set fire to the camp, collecting and hiding weapons, various other resistance activities. I would like to focus on escape, which was incredibly dangerous as captured escapees faced brutal punishment or death. The very act of planning and coordinating escape attempts required careful organization, timing, and tremendous courage from all involved. One notable escape occurred at the Goldfields camp, as mentioned. A group of 40 people, including the poet Hirsch Glick, escaped through a sewage canal near the fence. While some were captured, others managed to reach the forest where they wandered, trying to find help from local farmers. Arya Urbach, who was one of the escapees and later survived the war to eventually join the Israeli police Nazi hunters unit, which is in itself very interesting, recalled, "We were hungry. We had no food. I was wearing only a thin shirt and shivering from the cold, but in my heart there was hope that after so much suffering and torture, I might manage to stay alive. For the first time, I tasted the flavor of freedom. Another dramatic case involved the Jewish prisoner from Lagadi who was shot during the camp's liquidation. Though he was wounded, he managed to slip away and escape to the forest and survive the war. I would now like to discuss another case of a Nazi camp in the final stages of the war, which offers interesting parallels and contrasts to the Estonian camps we've discussed. HKP, Harris Craft Far Park, eh, 562, was a forced labor camp in Vilnius where Jewish workers and their families were housed in two six-story buildings on Suboc Street. The camp was surrounded by barbed wire. Under Wehrmacht commander Karl Plage, the camp operated differently from typical Nazi labor camps. Men worked primarily in vehicle repair garages outside the camp, while women worked in workshops within the compound. Life in HKP was characterized by both hardship and attempts at maintaining humanity. Despite crowded conditions and constant hunger, prisoners established a secret school for children. Aaron Einat, who survived HKP as a 9-year-old, recalled studying on the floor using fellow students' backs as writing surfaces. Children received only one meal per day from the camp kitchen, and in the winter, they even managed to create makeshift slides for play. On March 27, 1944, a Kinderaktion took place when German forces seized children from the camp. Only 25-30 children survived out of approximately 200. Resistance efforts existed within HKP. About 30 inmates planned an escape to join partisans, but the Jewish manager who was in charge of the inner life of the prisoners prohibited this, fearing collective punishment. The group persisted in their plans, but was ultimately halted when camp police discovered and destroyed their escape tunnel. The camp's final days came on July 2nd, 3rd, 1944, when inmates were rounded up for execution at the Ponari death site. Many resisted and were killed on sight, while others managed to escape to the city or forest. Some survived in hiding, Melina's hideouts. Commander Karl Plage played a crucial role in saving lives at HKP. He protected Jewish workers and their families. Before the camp's liquidation, Plage gathered workers and gave them an implicit warning. In 2005, Yad Vashem recognized him as righteous among the nations. The trauma of HKP continued to affect survivors long after liberation. At a 2010 gathering in Tel Aviv, survivors shared harrowing stories, including an account of desperate people in hiding being forced to make impossible choices for survival. These case studies illuminate several crucial aspects of Jewish resistance and survival in Nazi camps during the final phase of World War II. Through examining both the Estonian camp system and HKP, we can identify these distinct patterns of prisoner response to persecution. This comparative analysis enhances our understanding of the complex dynamics between perpetrators and victims in the Holocaust final months, while highlighting the importance of examining lesser-known cases in Holocaust historiography and Nazi camp system. Thank you very much.